As one of the foremost thought leaders in the space, James Serra has tackled a range of topics from BI and data architectures to big data and analytics in this popular blog and at speaking sessions around the world. Hi, James. Are you with us?
Yes, glad to be here.
A pleasure to have you as well. So I'm just going to dive into some questions that we have, if we can get some insights from you. And I'll start up top by asking, what do you think of the concept of the enterprise data model? Do you think it's time to move on from this idea of preparing all your requirements up front, then moving on to a development cycle? If not, how would you move from this approach towards a more iterative style of data warehousing, where data models are built incrementally based on the business's ever-evolving BI requirements?
Yeah, sure. I think most customers have moved on from that sort of waterfall approach where let's spend a lot of time gathering the requirements and then come back a few months later with what we've built. And they've switched into that waterfall agile type of development. And a lot of it has to do with the tools that have come out lately. If you look at something like Power BI, I found customers are now using that tool to define the business requirements. So instead of somebody from IT going to a client and saying, okay, what's your requirements? Let's take it down. Let's build something, come back, find out it's wrong, and have this cycle going on. They now go, hey, go use Power BI, prototype what you want, and we'll use that as a business requirements. And Power BI is sort of like a self-service ETL reporting tool that allows you to easily prototype something and create those requirements. And if not, it's usually, hey, we need a quick win. Let's go and start building something out and show the value of what we've built and get people excited, get the end users excited. A lot of times it unlocks budgets. And then you're also bringing in those end users early on so they feel like they're part of what you're building on there. And then they can get something of value. So you pick out something that you can do in the short term that has a lot of value. And then you come out with that. Now, I always say you want to keep your end goal in mind, your vision. It's sort of like building a city that you're going to break up into towns. And you may come up with a blueprint for this city with all the towns in there. Then you go and you build a town and you build one on top of the other. You don't go and build the whole thing and open it up in there. So you have that long-term vision of where you want to go, but you get those quick wins early on.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you talked about, the sort of primary goal of building a data warehouse, which is, serving those end user requirements. So with that in mind, when you actually talk about, building a schema that's best suited for that purpose, do you still think that the dimensional model is the best? Does it depend on the organization's requirements? What are your thoughts on the data vault, for example? Do you think that's going to overtake data dimensional modeling in the near future, the preferred technique, or does, everything have its place?
I will say that there's no way that Data Vault will ever take over dimensionally modeling. It's been around for over 20 years, and it's got a great use case. I find customers who need to do a lot of historical tracking and auditing using the Data Vault, but there's not a lot of those use cases that require something as, you can say, sophisticated as the Data Vault in there. So I think it has its place, but I see 99% of the customers using some sort of star schema along with a third normal form on there. And a lot of it depends on, can you get the performance you need at a third normal form? And if I'm joining a dozen or so tables, I may be able to get that performance, and I'll go to a star schema. So it's an extra layer of ETL, but you get a lot of benefit by having that extra layer in there. It also helps when you're looking at self-service BI in that if I don't have a star schema, then I have to know the relationship between all those tables, which could be very difficult for an end user. Usually you have one person in the company who knows how to join everything, and you rely on that person. Instead, you create that star schema, and then it's self-service BI. I can just go to a tool, a reporting tool, and just drag fields onto the form and build it out without having to understand how the relationships work, because the star schema gives you that. So there's a lot of great reasons for a star schema. And I would say probably 75% of the companies I see will use a star schema on top of a third normal form.
That makes sense. So talk a little bit about that data modeling, dimensional modeling perspective, but what do you think the role is that metadata has to play here? For example, a strong metadata management framework. Do you think metadata-driven framework can benefit data warehouse design? And if so, how?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of effort lately in creating data catalogs for customers. The idea behind that is that they're gathering so much data and you want to avoid having duplication of data. And we're doing this at EY at a really large scale because they're bringing in all this third party data. It could be literally tens of millions of dollars third party. And you don't want somebody going out and getting a license because they didn't realize the data was already there. So let's create a metadata catalog and let's create a data discovery tool, a marketplace where any end user can go, hey, I need to create something using this particular type of data. I wonder if we already have it. Let's go to the catalog and see. And if it's there, we now can instantly get access to that data and not have to have this duplication that's going on in there. Also, a big thing lately too with customers is lineage in there. I get this end value, this calculation. How did we get there? Where did it come from in there? Because I want to make sure it's right. So they go back and they look, and tracking the lineage is really important. And I keep saying Microsoft products because that's my background, but they just went GA with Azure Purview, which I blogged about today. And that does a pretty good job of capturing the lineage from certain products on there. So that's become really important. And that to me is metadata. The lineage is that. And all that is really important when you're making sure you're building out a schema. And that schema is also metadata. So that is another thing that I think you'll start seeing more of a push of people cataloging not just the data, but the data sets, which a Power BI tool does now. And I think you'll see that integrated more with data catalogs in there is, hey, it may be cool enough that I can see that we have customer data and product data, but maybe somebody's already built this data set. Maybe somebody's already even built a report and dashboard on that. And I can go and quickly use that instead of reinventing the wheel in there. So metadata is so important now. And without it, when we have this proliferation of data, and in some cases we have data in a data lake that doesn't have its own metadata within it, we got to create that. So you need a product, a solution that is going to match all that up. So it makes it a lot easier for people to discover this data.
So, I mean, you just touched on it right there. We're living obviously in the era of, big data, data lakes, unstructured, semi-structured data is a big thing now. And so how do you think, this sort of like explosion in volume, variety, and velocity has impacted the art of data modeling?
Yeah, it's made it more challenging in there because now you have to think of the size of the data, and I have to create a model that may not be performant if I don't do it correctly. So it adds so much more importance into making sure that design is correct. And also data governance is a huge part of it. So the data that gets into these models, how can I make sure that it's cleaned and that I'm joining data correctly on there? The biggest reason I see for failure of projects, data warehouse, big data projects, is not enough time in data governance. And they come out with a data set and some end user says, great, I'm gonna use this data set. And they go, wait a minute, this data is wrong. And now if that's their first impression, you've lost their confidence right up front. And they're not gonna trust anything you come out with. So you have to spend a lot of time up front validating that data, making sure that data set is correct. Bring in the users early on, tell them you're testing this stuff out and make sure it's valid. It's one way to do it. But it's hugely important to win their confidence when you're developing these solutions. So make sure you have enough time for the data governance.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on the statement that a robust verified data warehouse schema model equals an overall high quality data warehouse architecture? So what is the link there?
I would agree with that. Again, if that data governance process is in place, and then this gets into more than just technology. And I've had a lot of discussion with customers. Is you can have the best technology in the world, but you really need to have the people in the process in place. Okay, we need to have data governance. We need to have maybe a center of excellence. We need to have meetings to decide who owns the data, and we have to have a vetting process for cleaning data. And if we clean the data in data warehouse, we also bring it back to the source system. All these things got to be discussed in there. So it's so important to have those right people and the right skills, which is very challenging, especially now. We've seen lately a dearth on talent, in there, and finding people with these skill sets is a challenge on there. But there are enough examples out there that you can go and see how people set up their company and their groups and the people in the process for these type of solutions that we're building in there, and try to follow those best practices.
That makes a lot of sense. So we actually have a user question here, which I'm going to throw to you. Given the MPP technology and columnar storage, do you see a trend in using the one big table OBT model for reporting and analytics on top of a dimensional model?
Oh, well, an MPP, for those that may not know, that's multiple parallel processing in there. So the idea is I can take queries that could take hours to run on as an SMP or a typical solution on there, and put it on an MPP system like a Synapse or Redshift or a Google BigQuery, and it's going to run anywhere from 20 to 100 times faster on there. It could do that with third normal form tables. It can do that even better with star schema, but I've seen tremendous results from lots of data, even with many different joins in there. So the good thing about MPP technology is you don't have to go to extremes to have that data denormalized in there, that big table. So I don't see that. And I did blog about this maybe a year ago, and I have to sometimes reread my blogs because I forget some of the things, the points I brought out about just this, a star schema versus a big table in there. And then my conclusion was you almost always want to go to star schema for numerous reasons, which you can read about on there. And the idea that you need this big table, you don't with the MPP technology in most cases. And some third-party products required you to do that, or underneath the covers were doing that because of the performance issues. But because technology has advanced so much, it's rare that I find a customer going to that length of creating a big table. Instead, they use the star schema.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you've touched on automation or third-party tools a bunch of times, and just to sort of like get to the heart of that topic, what role does automation really have to play here? What kind of advantages do you think enterprises could see from using a purpose-built solution to drive their data modeling, verification, and all these other processes?
I'm all about shortcuts. So when I talk to customers, and I did this a lot at Microsoft in my role when I was there before I moved to EY, it was, well, wait a minute here. What you're talking about, I think you could probably use some automation tools, some third-party product on here. And it's okay, yeah, there's an extra expense on that, but the time savings and the accuracy you may get out of that could be well worth it. So yeah, I'm all for those third-party tools. Of course, there are trade-offs. You have to get the skill set. So if you don't know it, you got to learn it. And is it an automation tool that requires that automation tool all the time going forward? Or is it just creating the code that you can pick up and use? Because if it's something that you always have to use that tool, then there could be some challenges with that. As the product that it's building off of updates its features, that's got to update it too. Or maybe you can't use all the features in there. So you have to look pretty closely at it. But there are so many good tools out there now that shortcuts that process, that provides the automation, especially in most cases, what customers are building is not that different than thousands of other customers have built. So yeah, there's an automation tool for that. It's very rare that you're building something so unique or at such a scale that a third-party tool wouldn't help. Even more so if you're in some industry that's popular, like healthcare or finance, banking, those all have retail, those all have very repeatable scenarios that you can use an automation tool for.
Awesome. I think we touched on pretty much everything that we sort of planned for this discussion. James, are there any sort of parting words you want to leave us with before?
I always say, if you've never gone down this path before and you're building on a data warehouse solution, get some experts, find some people. It's, again, the talent is hard. It's hard to find now, but find some consulting companies and third-party company that's been down this road before. So you, at least early on in the process, because this is what I do in my role at EY as a architecture lead, is that you need to make some really key decisions early on. And if you make those wrong decisions down the road, it can wind up costing you a lot of time and money. So find people who can help you make those right decisions early on, because all the projects that I've seen have failed. It's rare that it could be a part people process. It's rare that the technology was bad. It's that you chose the wrong technology. You wanted some relational database, and you try to make it work where a NoSQL solution, for example, would have been much better on there. So get a lot of help early on making those big key decisions, and understand what's coming in the road, down the road, and the roadmaps of a lot of products. So if you're using Microsoft products, make sure you know what is in development for the next 3 to 6 months, because these projects take a long time to build, and you don't want to be a few months in and all of a sudden Microsoft goes, oh, we got this new product and a new feature, and you go, I wish we had known about this. And I say this because this was a lot of my role at Microsoft, was making sure people were educated about what was coming down the road, because the data warehouse projects are long paths, and it's 6 months a year that you're building it. It never ends really, but a lot of those big decisions are going to be early on, and you need to know that roadmap. So that would be my parting words.
All right, I think those are really good words to end on. You mentioned there like how long these projects can take,
Yeah.
and I think that really segues perfectly into what we've been talking about today in this webinar.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for your time, James. I think you offered some really great insights for our viewers.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I can talk all day about this, so I appreciate the invite and helping out.
Definitely, and maybe we'll take you up on that offer at some point in the future.
Anytime, my friend.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.